Call the meeting to order and start with pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we are in a situation where an elegant solution for us not having to be in two places at the same time. And we are currently in the Board of Finance meeting. I'll, in a minute, ask for the minutes to be approved. And at that point, I will make a motion for the Board of Finance meeting to be recessed to the call of the chair. And we will then go into the joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen. We will go through that agenda, and then when that agenda is done, if there's no further business for the Board of Finance, we will then adjourn the Board of Finance meeting. Does that make sense to anybody? Everybody?
It's all good.
Brad missed it, so he's gonna say, what the heck?
Yeah.
So anyway.
It's over.
Yeah.
It's over.
Well done. So with that in mind, Jerry distributed the minutes as well as all the attachments. Thank you very much, Jerry, and I'll ask for a motion for their approval.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Is there any discussion, changes, modifications to the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? They have been passed. Okay, so, I'll now, move that we recess the regular meeting of the Board of Finance. And is there a second?
Second.
Is there a vote? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, so we will call the joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance to order. We'll skip the Pledge of Allegiance, which has already been recited. This agenda calls for public comment first. So if there's any public comment online, we'll start with that. Please raise your hand if you're an attendee and would like to comment, raise your hand and you'll be recognized. Is there any public comment in the room?
Yes.
Any public comment in the room? Hearing none. Any comment online?
Don't see it.
All right, hearing none, we can now go to, this says comments from the selectmen. I'll pass on any comments.
I'll pass.
All right, this is before the board, 2025 budget review. We can start.
All right.
And,
Department of Police Services. Renee, you get to do it. Is the chief,
you're waiting for the chief presumably.
I assume he was coming.
Yeah, he does plan on, I mean, my understanding was that he did plan on coming. It's at our pleasure, Mr. Chair, whether we
know who the presenter co-host is? Could that be?
Well, can you unmute? Or,
It's on
no,
their side.
presenter, co-host.
Yeah.
Larry, I don't know if Larry's here.
Yeah, I'll go check.
And he can maybe tell us who the,
I don't even have my phone, so I can call them. The laptop that is wanted.
do you have an estimated time of arrival?
Here's water.
I've texted the chief. And, so, is there anything we wanted to catch up on with anything else? In particular, do you want to do?
Or do
No.
the Board of,
You could, I don't, what's your pleasure?
Oh, no, I don't.
No, I am not ready.
Well, Chance, I'm ready.
oh. Why don't we just skip ahead to adjournment?
I think that would be the desired outcome.
That's not a good thing.
Yeah, because, and then, that was it on this, and just budgets and then adjournment. So do we have anything in particular that we want to present?
No,
That's my.
We can, talk about, expected general government revenues.
Okay.
The other action item. That
Park
one?
and Rec.
Yeah,
Yeah,
get that.
Can't do an action.
Well,
what,
not yet.
what? We're not talking about Park and Rec budget, we're talking about revenue, on the revenue side.
Oh, okay.
So, basically, as a prelude to what you're about to hear, at the last meeting, I suggested that perhaps because Park and Rec has large projects coming up and we may have some opportunities, new opportunities for Park and Rec. Park and Rec generates somewhere between $250,000 and $300,000 a year in their own revenue. That revenue is general fund revenue, offsets the mill rate in our town. However, it's a heck of an income stream for a department. And so what I am proposing, and you guys are going to see it, this is kind of I'm going to propose that we take $100,000 of that revenue that we would normally receive from Park and Rec and dedicate it to Park and Rec. So that they would take the first 100,000 of revenue generated by their departments. And it would go into their capital fund for future projects. So the way we did that, it ends up being a net loss of revenue to the town, not of 100,000, but of 40,000. And the way we get there is we have been receiving more revenue from the state than we actually put into the revenue budget. The reason for that is when I first came into office in 2011, we had state revenues of about $1.2 million at that time. During 2014, 15, 16, there were so many mid-year cuts because many of you may recall, the state was in crisis constantly. So we were originally cut from 1.2 to like 900,000, and then 700,000, and then 550,000. And these were mid-year cuts. So we were projecting 1.2, and they said, you're not going to get 1.2, you're going to get $1 million. So I dialed it back to about $450,000 at one point, even though they projected 550. And the reason I did that is I'm like, hey, in the future, they may dial it back again. Well, how times have changed in the state of Connecticut from a revenue perspective. So we have inched that number up from 450 to 500 over the last year or two. And this year I'm projecting we go to 525. We receive 525. In fact, we're probably close to that number already this year.
We're over it.
We're over it. All right. So if you decrease Park and Rec revenues by 100, I'm increasing state revenue by 25. At the transfer station, they're collecting more money than they have in recent years due to being a little bit more diligent at the front desk. So I increased those revenues by a modest 10,000. Increased building, I think, we went from 180 to 200,000 in revenues. Tom in that office has consistently been bringing in, I dare to say, 250 to 400,000 out of that office in permit fees. And I'm forgetting.
200,000, 70, we Harvey's Beach to 75,
Oh, Harvey's Beach, we went up a little bit from what to what?
from 55 to 75.
55 to 75, which is well within, well,
And
no,
then-
but that's a park and rec revenue.
Yeah,
But we
but we
increased it.
increased it,
Right.
right? So 101, it was 101.
Because they brought in 101,000 at Harvey's Beach last year. So we went from 50 to 75. So the net end result, I said, let's stop increasing revenues there and the town will take a hit in the mill rate of $40,000. So we increased revenues 60, we'll decrease revenues, by 40. And Park and Rec can then take the first 100 of their revenues and put them into their capital projects. So, that is, something I was going to recommend to the Board of Selectmen. We talked about trying to get Park and Rec a better funding stream over the years. I think once you do the first 100, perhaps looking forward, you can now bite off further chunks. 125, maybe you can get to 150, maybe you can get to 200. You know, if Park and Rec gets to 200,000 of keeping their own revenues, I would submit that they're going to be able to do many of their own projects with their own money, in addition to the $2 extra that they're collecting at mini golf. They already have 350 in the bank, 350,000 right now. I think the number, about 320.
350, yeah.
So you can see how if they want to do $1 million project, you can get there relatively quickly. So this is a little bit ahead of where we want to be.
Right.
It's not really, the Board of Finance is an appropriations board. But this is something that I am going to bring to the Board of Selectmen next Tuesday. You guys, Georgianne's been out, you're gonna get in advance, this week, what I'm proposing, and then we can discuss it. But,
And can I just make a,
yeah,
I don't know how many people saw the front page of the Hartford Current today, but in the Hartford Current is the discussion about what's happening at the state level in looking at ways in which they can bring more people into the parks. That there are,
Yeah, so-
as they say, the Champagne parks that everybody knows about, but there's a whole bunch of parks that aren't being utilized. And so one of the things that they're talking about are various different kinds of activities, which could be activities that people get charged for, but would be exciting activities, whether it's music or food trucks or a variety of different things. So I think, when we met Park and Rec in on that Saturday, that's one of the things we raised, is there not only idea of a sinking fund like this, but are there other revenue opportunities that they can look at that's not charging residents more money to use the parks? So I just want, that's out there. Luckily, the state is taking the lead on looking at what's possible, and maybe we can follow on their coattails.
yeah, I saw that, bringing in a private contractor.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Just want to clarify, when you say it's Park and Rec's money, they still have to come to us to expend it.
yeah, I would suggest we set it up that way like we do for the Board of Ed, yes. George?
I'm actually going to follow up on Paul's question, but perhaps a very different twist to this. And so I'm going to show my bias, obviously. At the end of the day, the money is the same, right? Because if they need a major capital improvement, something, whether they use $100,000 they put in their fund, or whether they come to us and ask for $100,000, at the end of the day, that's what they need, right? So I don't think to me the money makes any difference. To me, it's the procedural process and the mental approach to the procedural process. If they need to come to us to basically get approved for every money they spend on something we gave them, then I don't think the procedural process has changed at all. In which case, I'm not exactly sure what's been gained. But if actually providing them $100,000 of that money, the income they generated into their fund that they can do without too much hurdle jumping,
Yeah.
hoop jumping, then there's a procedural change, in which case then there is that a change.
So right now, as we build it into the mill rate, in theory, if the budget ran true to expenditures and revenues ran true to expenditures, in theory, we would end up with $0 at the end of the year. So if Park and Rec needs to do $1 million project, they may have to come to the town. This board may have to bond a project. The idea is to give them a dedicated savings account that is dedicated. Board of Finance holds yay or nay approval over it, but it's a dedicated account, just like we were talking about Public Works, just like the Board of Ed actually has a similar account, that we have a dedicated account that we put Board of Ed funds into to use as they would propose, approved by the Board of Finance, but dedicated for Board of Ed projects. So I hear, it is a little different. I understand what you're saying. At the end of the day, it's a bucket. And there's a little more in this bucket now and a little less in this bucket, but, it just, it would allow them to do projects without potentially having to involve further town meeting or referendum on a larger scale. It's a capital reserve fund. That's all we're trying to do.
And if it actually comes, if it actually plays out that way, then I think it is a gain, it's a substantial difference. But
It's a reserve fund.
sure, but it.
And because they have a lot of stuff on their plate. And I think the Board of Selectmen, Park and Rec certainly, and I think even this board has come to really appreciate their role in this town and how they're not only a driver of the economy, but as we've talked in the past, a way to bring people into this town to say, hey, I went to that park and it was awesome and I really want to live in Old Saybrook because it's so great, type of thing. So anyway, that's it. That's more of a preview. I don't know that we need any action at this point. We could probably move on. You'll see that in the budget. Be presented to the Board of Selectmen and then to you in March as part of the budget. But it's a net loss of revenue that will be accounted for in the mill rate of 40,000, and we get there by increasing other expected revenues that have been very steady and consistent. Without, I think, still being relatively conservative on that, on the revenue end, okay?
I may be able to add a slight bit of perspective. I spent 8 years in Parks and Recreation. And while we were in Parks and Rec, and we had the opportunity to acquire the field at Ferry Landing. We had the opportunity to acquire the field off of Maple Avenue as well. So those were difficult things to plan for. It was hoped for. If you had that 100,000 going into a fund every year, as a board, you have a better way of planning for the future and planning for those long-term needs, in my opinion, versus hoping that you can go to town and get something. Instead, you have, a dedicated bucket that you can plan, I think, more effectively.
Not competing with other departments, so thank you. All right, so we're gonna move on, Chief. Yep, there he is.
How we doing, everyone?
Yeah.
Good. Just so I know, what Zoom are we on? Are we on the Board of Selectmen?
Yeah, the one that is on the agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there was two. There was the.
We're on the Board of Selectmen joint meeting.
Cool.
with the Board of Finance.
All right, let me get this out to you guys first while I set up and get everything else out. Hey, Megan, how are you? You just take one, pass it down.
Thank you.
This is we can call it a pre-quiz to the presentation. So if you can just go through, fill out some answers. When you get to the pictures on the back, all you have to do is write down the last name of the police officer that's pictured there. And I'm going to.
I didn't get any of them, but
You did not?
no, I did not.
That is wrong.
I agree with you.
You should talk to somebody about
And you're the chief, so I'm talking to you.
that. Done.
Can you get me one, please?
Yes, absolutely. Why don't you take this one?
This is gonna be a good one. We'll have all the pieces.
Union president is here, Sergeant Walker.
I have the draft.
Oh, you don't want that.
Okay.
You want the one that we printed today. Jerry Lewis,
Thank you.
George, how are you? Congrats on the election to Board of Finance. It's gonna feel weird in about 45 minutes, you know. Brad, Mark, there you go.
The other department comes up.
Megan.
Oh, she has her name on it. Sure.
Eric here?
No,
Oh, Eric.
No, he's supposed to be online. I don't know.
he hasn't come online yet.
Okay.
So we may be in.
Might be on the other one.
Paul. Thank you.
Just.
You go.
Yeah. Hot off the press.
Bruce.
Thank you, John.
All right.
Come on.
Oh, you got it.
Yeah.
Can I put down his friend Dave?
Sure. Oh, I bet you're not on there, but.
It's not, but I love her.
A couple more minutes with the little pre-test. You don't get the dog's name right, there's a problem.
Shoot
Like that, I threw that in. I threw that in first.
That was a cheat.
You knew it. That's like the free square on bingo, I
Yeah.
thought. I thought that was nice of them.
That's nice of you.
I have Larry's down here. He can do it. Eric.
So for the public watching, the questions on the pre-test are, who decides how many police officers work on any given shift? How many police officers work on a patrol shift? There are 365 days in the calendar year, not including a leap year. How many days are police officers generally available for patrol work? How many police officers are needed to staff one individual patrol shift, 365 days a year? How many dispatchers work on each shift? Who decides on employee salaries? Who determines how overtime assignments are made? And what are 3 things that you want to learn from the perf study? And then there are pictures of some of our staff, and we're looking for members around the table just to put their names down. I'll give you a couple more minutes and then we can start.
When it, I would suggest that you have a lot to get to.
Oh, not a lot.
Well, why don't we jump in?
Well, I'm interested in the feedback on the pre-test.
Is this multiple choice?
That's part of the presentation. Part of the presentation. So we'll call on some folks. We'll give you just a couple more minutes and then we can start in. You're choosing not to do the pre-test?
I am.
I'm
Choosing not to, I'm not talking to you, sir. I'm talking to the
well, I'm
chair.
anxious to get forward with the budget
Me
presentation.
too, that's part of the presentation.
I don't see how it's part of the presentation.
You'll see if you participate.
Well, let's,
Even if I don't participate, I'm sure I'll see it. I'm just waiting.
Well, that's disappointing. The good news is that the budget that's in front of you is $80,085 less than what we initially submitted to the first selectman and the board of selectmen for consideration.
Yeah, like you told me that.
And this is because the police commission successfully has filled all of our vacancies with the exception of the second in command vacancy. So as we will discuss tonight, our budget is based on fiscal need, proven formulas. And so when there's an adjustment to the data, it gets plugged into the formula and whatever comes out, comes out. So because we hired 3 new patrolmen,
And all of those patrolmen are entry-level patrolmen. And the spots that we had reserved in the budget were at different tiers. The budget goes down. The budget doesn't just go down in the salary line item, it goes down in all of the supplemental line items, because as salaries are adjusted, it affects every single personnel line item. So for years, I have been presenting to the Board of Selectmen, the Police Commission, and the Board of Finance, and we have spoken about our fiscal needs, our fiscal liabilities for the upcoming fiscal year. We've talked about the proven formulas, and we've talked about how we budgeted. This is just an example of how transparent our budget process is. We didn't choose to leave the higher salaries in, or we didn't just choose to reduce from the salary line item and not all of the supplemental items. What it is, and that's how we determine our budget. So each year when we start the budget process, we legitimately, for all personnel related expenses, we treat this as a zero-based budgeting exercise. So we start with a blank piece of paper. We don't simply say, this officer gets a contractual 3% raise, so this is what the budget is. We look at the current list of personnel and any vacancies we currently have and plug in those contractual numbers that then relate to the totals in all of our supplemental line items. So for years and years and years, and Carl can tell you this as a former chairman of the Board of Finance before he took over as our first selectman, the police department was literally the only department that would produce this document, this type of document. Over the course of 2 finance directors, with Leanne Palladino sitting in the seat now, who does a phenomenal job for us, the town now has a budget book that we've put out over the last several fiscal years. So this used to be a standout product. No more, because we have a standout product now for the whole town. In the document that you've received and the new document that you've received tonight, that again shows that $80,000 reduction in our fiscal ask for next year, you notice that each and every one of our line items has a description. So we live by those descriptions throughout the fiscal year. In other words, we don't take monies from one line item if it doesn't relate to the description in the line item. So there might be some line items that run in the red during the fiscal year. There might be some line items that stay in the black. We monitor the bottom line, but we respect the description and the use that was approved by the police commission of each and every individual line item. So sometimes when we get to the end of the year, or if you're a quick study and you're paying attention to all the police commission meetings, you'll hear me brief the commission every single month on our operating budget. And as we have different things that affect the operating budget, I'll brief the police commission. There is never a penny spent by the Department of Police Services that has not been approved by some sort of board, commission, or town leader. Okay, so we take that very, very seriously. Years ago, when we began with our first finance director, Paul's late wife, we decided that the operating budget of the police department was in crisis. John, you were on the board. Every single year, I think Brad, you were on the board too. Every single year, the budget was running in the red. We sat down outside of the emotional budget cycle and wanted to right the ship because it was just getting old, right? In January or February, you're trying to submit the lowest budget possible to make everyone happy, even though you know that was not going to meet the fiscal liabilities of the department. And then in June, everyone was all upset because there was a budget overrun. We wanted to end that cycle, and we did successfully. And so the formulas that we created then have been tweaked a little bit, but we're still using them today because the budget cycle for the Department of Police Services has been very successful year over year over year for at least the past 6-7 years. We have not come into the red at the end of the fiscal year. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. We had some staff turnover, so the salary line item, ran in the black while other lines ran in the red. But we were very cognizant each year to make sure that we were meeting the bottom line. In the book that I've presented to you tonight, I just want you to kind of open up the first couple pages. Let's pick a page so I can show you how it works. Let's go to page 3. On the top of page 3, you're gonna see 3 numbers that were represented on the upper right-hand corner. First one is the department request. That is the request that I sent to the police commission. The second one is what the police commission initially approved. And then the third number, making these books come fresh off the copier today, is the adjustment number based on the action that the police commission took at its last meeting to hire those new 3 police officers. And I wanted to detail that so you can kind of follow the bouncing ball, if you will, of the budget process that has just begun. So here we are, it's February. I don't think I need to explain to this board, many of you are tenured members, not only of the board, but of the community, on why we need a police department. So in previous years, I've spent a lot of time showing you data, traffic count data, how much theft there is. I'm not going to do that tonight because I don't think it's necessary. If there's someone around this table who does not think we need a police department, then we'll have a conversation after the meeting. But I don't think that's appropriate for tonight. What I do think is appropriate for tonight is for the members of the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen to understand how we put together this document that comes before you. It is very easy for us as human beings that have emotion and inherent bias to look at a budget number and say, I don't like that. I can tell you that I don't like the budget number in this book either. But it's not up to our each individual opinions to like or dislike a fiscal ask. We all have a responsibility around this table. I know that I have 2 constituencies that I represent as I sit here and talk to you tonight, and so do you. One of them is obviously the citizens and visitors of the town of Old Saybrook. Out of everyone in this room, Carl and I are probably joined at the hip to make sure that public safety services are delivered in a timely, efficient, and safe manner. He and I both shoulder that responsibility. When he takes his oath for office and I took my oath for office, they are very, very similar on how we want to make sure that the health, safety, and welfare of those that were entrusted of caretaking gets accomplished. My second constituency are some of the men and women that I've included on your pretest. The men and women of the Department of Police Services, who day in and day out deliver the very services that our community needs. Sometimes these are very, very dangerous services, and sometimes they're quality of life services. I can tell you in my 28 years of law enforcement and 15 years of proudly being your police chief, that everyone's idea of importance as it relates to the police department is personal and sometimes very private. It's also incredibly fluid. You might not think much of the agency today, but tomorrow, God forbid, if you have a need to call 911 and need our life-saving services, your opinion might change. And so we accept that in public safety. But what I need to make sure of is that when we have conversations about our fiscal needs, that we're not focused on our personal thoughts about a number, but we ask ourselves the question, are we budgeting properly? So getting back to what I said in the beginning, we start and we use a zero-based budget formula. Leanne sends over a nice draft. I thank her for that, but I still make my staff start from scratch. So instead of on page 3, that personnel line item, just having a percent added to it, I have to go through each name, check the contract that our police union has with the town of Old Saybrook and our dispatcher union has with the town of Old Saybrook, and see which officers or dispatchers are entitled to a step raise in addition to their general wage increase. Both are contractual in nature. And then we have to make sure that we detail that in our budget. All of our supplemental line items come off of the data that's included in the master salary line item. So there's a master salary line item for our police officers, and there's a master salary line item for our dispatchers. The department is broken up into 2 halves, if you will. Field services, that's everyone with a badge and a gun. and support services. That's everyone that works for us with NOCO. Okay, so certified law enforcement and not certified law enforcement. So all of our police officer expenditures are included in the field services part of our budget. All of our non-certified staff salaries and personnel expenses are in that support side of the budget. And then we have a third part, which is our general expenditures, right? Our electric bill, our gas bill, gasoline, things to that nature. So I'd like to highlight some formula work that we do. So let us go to, let's see, let's go to page 6. So on page 6, you see the formula that relates to the data on page 4 and 5. Vacation day allotment. My least favorite topic of a person that's done the personnel schedule since 2004. So we give our employees vacation time. Turns out they want to spend time with their family and friends, and this is a contractual requirement. I wish everyone would just come to work every day, but it turns out that's not how that works. So we have to allot for the backfilling. And Bruce, let's get to that. So on the pretest, one of the first questions is, who decides how many police officers work on any given shift? What do we have for some answers?
Chief.
Okay? No,
Sergeant in chief.
no,
I'm surprised.
me too. The labor contract. So this was negotiated between the police union and the town of Old Saybrook on how many employees work on each shift. So in our contract, it says there shall be, one patrol sergeant and 2 patrolmen. There's got to be 3 people on at all times, one of which is being a designated supervisor. So when you look at the operation of the police department, some of you might say, oh, geez, chief, can't you just put on 2 people on the midnight shift and save money? My answer is a respectful, no, I cannot. The only way we could reduce, and I would never advocate it at all, based on our operational needs and safety of our officers, but the only way that that can change is if our police union agreed to that. Either during negotiations, which we're about to start, or as an offside side letter memorandum of understanding. How many police officers work on a patrol shift? Who captured that? I just gave the answer. Quick study, Bruce, 3, right? So I have to make sure that we always have 3 police officers working at all times. So the other night, late on an evening shift, there was a domestic violence call that came in. It actually came in as a 911 hangup. Dispatcher called back, heard some things in the background, dispatched police to the area. We didn't have an address. We used some cell phone GPS tracking, got to the area. We found a gentleman that had harmed his female acquaintance, and that gentleman chose not to comply with any of our commands. He bit, punched, and kicked 3 different police officers. The prisoner had to go to the clinic. A police officer had to go to a clinic. So if they're there, what do I not have? 3 police officers. So it's our obligation now to order somebody who was home to come back in to meet this contractual minimum. These types of things happen all the time. So getting back to vacation day coverage, we have to allow our personnel to take vacation time. When we do, they get backfilled, right? So on page 4, I show you exactly which people, based on their current assignment, would have to be backfilled if they chose to use some vacation time. And we choose to backfill 23 positions. But on page 6, I tell you that we don't backfill at 100%. That we backfill 90% for our leadership team, and we backfill at 75% for our patrol officers. So I think it's important for members of the Board of Finance, and everyone's tenured on the Board of Selectmen, so I apologize for boring you, that we are not always looking for a one-to-one replacement. The answer to your question is, well, can you kind of do things with the schedule to cover people without overtime? The answer is yes. You have to have the staffing to do that. And we do that very well, again, coming in at 90% and 75%. Then there are categories like what's also on page 6, additional hours. These are not formula based. However, they haven't changed in over a decade. So for about a decade, we have asked for 71 8-hour shifts. In that category, you flip to page 7 there, we've asked for 135 shifts. We have never, ever deviated from this model. While one might run in the red at the end of the year, another one might run in the black. These have been to be proven to be successful in the administration of our budget. So we've asked for no change. The dollar amount changes because the cost of personnel changes. So if through negotiations this year, the police officers get a 3% raise, that's what we budgeted for, anticipating that would be the raise. Let's say they're successful in that piece of negotiation, they get a 4% raise. This budget changes as a result of those contract negotiations, right? So the answer to the question on your pretest, who decides on employee salaries? It's contractual, right? So Carl, by state statute, negotiates with the police union, but there's lots of moving pieces to a negotiation. We're looking at salary dollars right here. The first selectman may choose to give a higher general wage increase and find a better cost savings down the road with a more long-term liability benefit for the bargaining unit. He does that as part of his job of negotiating for the town of Old Saybrook. But we're in budget time, we're always kind of conscious when we're looking at the operating budget of the short-term fiscal liabilities. And that's what we're looking at today. And so as we go through this book, if you meet me on page 9, we also do things that are risky. So our police officers get sick time, right? So if you remember, there was a time where we frowned on employees calling in sick. Are you really sick? Do you just have the sniffles? Is it just a stomach bug? You can't make it in? Then we had this little thing called the pandemic, where we encouraged everyone who thought they might sneeze not to come to work. So now, I don't think we've ever left that mantra of how employees should behave if they're feeling ill. We encourage them not to come in. So we have sick time. Our police officers earn 1 day per month by contract each year. So they earn 12 sick days every year. They're allowed to bank 195 days each. 195 days per employee. So if you look at the first column, you'll see what each individual employee's sick bank balance is as of November 2023. I budget for 132 days. My potential liability is 932. I cannot predict if any of our employees is going to get ill or injured and need a lot of time. I also cannot predict in February what's going to happen between the months of July 1st, 2024 and June 30th, 2025, with someone's family having a need for an employee to be home and they use their federally mandated family medical leave. I don't know in February if one of my employees is going to have a baby next year. I don't know if a single officer or dispatcher is going to get married and therefore their benefits change, right? They go from single to couple or family. I can't predict that. So our budget starts with zero-based budgeting, our known fiscal liabilities. We then follow the track record of some of these personnel line items that are not formula-based, and we know what we've used over the years and it's been successful. But then we move into budgeting categories like police sick, injured replacement, the dispatchers have the same type of line item, where we are making an educated guess and hoping for the best. But I never know, sitting here in February, what this is going to look like next June, depending on if people get sick, injured, or need family sick time. As we go through the book, I want to point out just a couple of different things. In the police officer's contracts, their holidays are treated two different ways depending on their hire date. Let me bring you through how that happens. I'm a police officer and I was hired before a certain date. Every one of my holidays, Christmas, Easter, Memorial Day, the holidays that are built into my contract, I get as additional floating vacation days. So if I'm a tenured employee, I can have 25 vacation days and about 14 or 15 extra holiday days that become vacation days. If I'm an employee that was hired after a certain date, I don't get as many of those holidays as a floating vacation day. Instead, I get some of them as a floating vacation day, and the others are paid out to me at straight time twice a year, December and June. So sometimes the elements of the contract depend on when an employee enters our employ. And so as you look at those various charts, you might be like, well, wait a minute. How come this cop gets this and this cop gets that? It might just be that they were hired under two different aspects of the contract. If you think that that gets confusing, you are correct. In the last, in between contracts, there was a memorandum of understanding that went out. And as part of one of the elements of that memorandum of understanding, there is now premium holiday pay attached to employees, dispatchers, and police officers that have to work on specific holidays. So if you have to work on Thanksgiving or Christmas Eve, you get a premium rate. If you are ordered to work on that day, you get an additional premium rate. None of that is included in our fiscal spending plan. So that is another example of, hey, can you try to make things work with the budget? Yes, that's something else that we're trying to absorb in the budget. So there are many efficiencies, and then there are also many additional costs that are absorbed into the budget as part of this fiscal plan. One of the final things I like to say about the booklet in front of you is this is not a normal police budget. I know, John, you know, we love comparing this budget to other towns.
I certainly do.
And even though UCOA was supposed to fix everything for municipalities across the state, it has not. And so in our budget, we detail in great detail each one of our cost centers. Some police departments just have a line item that says overtime. And as part of that overtime is their sick coverage, their vacation coverage, their personal, it's all lumped into one thing. I'd rather show you this in a very transparent format, so we can see what our true costs are year over year. Well, it doesn't matter because we don't build our budget on that. It's nice to be able to say, wow, this happened in this year. What was the reason for the anomaly? And those are the things that I report to the police commission about monthly. Additionally, when you take this document and you say, well, let me go compare it to other police departments, I want you to remember a couple of things. Number one, some police departments in the area do not include any type of healthcare benefits as part of their operating budget. That is a significant portion of this budget. So not apples to apples. Some of the area police department budgets do not include fuel in their budget, or they have a placeholder like $1,000 or $3,000. And I always thought, my gosh, do they plug them all in? But in each case, the municipality has a master line item for employee healthcare. And they may break it out into a cost center, but they don't attach it to each individual operating budget. They may have one municipal line item for fuel. They may have a cost center, but they don't attach it to each individual department. In some police departments, the emergency communication function are dedicated public safety dispatchers that work 24/7, 365. And in fact, let's go to our pre-quiz. How many dispatchers work on each shift? What do you got?
I'm saying two.
Two? Right, it is two. And about 3 years ago, the police commission made the change to go from one on the midnight shift to two, because we wanted that dispatcher in the bathroom on the midnight shift not to have to answer 911 calls. It was definitely a safety and employee welfare thing. So we appreciate that. But as we go through the budget, those summaries, again, are dealing with known fiscal liabilities. Let's see, who determines how overtime assignments are made?
Don't they sign up and there's a list that you work through?
That would be interesting.
I
No,
thought that was an option.
Contract, right?
contract. So all of these supplemental personnel line items apply back to that question on your pretest. Let me ask you a question that's not on a test. When does an employee earn overtime? Is it after 8 hours or after 40 hours in a pay period?
No idea.
What the hours in a pay period?
8.
8.
Keep in mind, our police officers work a 4-day on, 2-day off work week. So there are some weeks where they work only 32 hours based on their rotation, very common in public safety, but they earn 40 hours of compensation. But during any one of those 8-hour shifts, police officer or dispatcher, if they work over 5 minutes, they're allowed to, under the Fair Labor Standards Act, to submit for overtime. Overtime assignments are dictated by the contract. And so they have a card file rotation system where one of our first line supervisors has to contact somebody. If they don't want the job, their name goes on the bottom of the card file. If they take the job, it goes there. If they're not eligible to work, they stay on the top. It's this very cumbersome system, but it was negotiated between the town and the union. So I can't say there's a shift vacancy on Wednesday. I want the least expensive patrol officer to fill that shift to save money in the budget. I do not have that ability. So part of my responsibility, being the police chief, is to make sure that I'm properly managing the employee contract on behalf of the town of Old Saybrook, not to get us in situations where I violate that agreement, which results in, a municipal prohibitive practice complaint or a grievance that could wind up being very costly to the town. And so these types of things, I think, are important to you to know when you're reviewing our budget. In 15 years, if there's been a way to save $1, I have worked very, very hard to do that. I know how to stretch every dollar very, very far. My concern for the town is that the next police chief that comes to you with a budget is going to be a lot different than what you see here now. Because a lot of the things that are done are absorbed by myself at no cost to the town. And that's a concern I think you're gonna face very soon. And so the budget that's in front of you is our fiscal need for next year. When you deliberate about the budget, first the first selectman, then the board of selectmen, and then the board of finance after March 1st, I need you to look at the budget and think about those two constituencies that we represent. The citizens and visitors of the town of Old Saybrook that use our services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And these very people on your pre-quiz. The men and women of the Department of Police Services who do a heck of a job, who I believe are underpaid and underbenefited, but we're working on that. This is also my constituency, and these folks have to be your constituency as well. Because this document not only provides a fiscal request to deliver our traditional and non-traditional services in the most effective, efficient, fiscally responsible, and safe manner, but it also supplies the benefits and salaries and the safety-related tools that the men and women of the Department of Police Services need to carry out the mission for our citizens and visitors. So I'll be more than happy to entertain any questions that you have on the budget. Understanding that you just got the new document that has an $80,000 reduction, but I think that you should agree that that's a positive.
So I just want to make one comment. There's been a lot of contractual references tonight, and the chief has sat side by side with me.
Absolutely.
And I much appreciate it. Brings a lot of knowledge, of course, to the negotiations. And it is typical that on pay, benefits, health insurance, that I will generally make decisions and put proposals forward. On operational issues, and the chief has referenced a lot of them, whether you're getting paid on straight time on a holiday, whether you're getting 6 days or floating holidays, he has come to me repeatedly and said, this is something that I think will work, save the town money. And we try to negotiate it, and there's a lot of those that you've referenced. So that has been typically, I don't know how he needs to run his department day by day, whether, a lot of this, how he's gonna squeeze 3 cops on a shift out of 25 officers on a, and lucky to have 25 when we've had it. Have you had it?
I have, since becoming police chief on October 21st, 2009, I have never had a full certified, healthy roster of 25 full-time
I
law
thought you
enforcement
did
positions.
for a short period of time.
Never once. Never once. And so we might have positions filled, and let me pause for a second, because George and Megan, I'm not sure you know this. When we hire a new police officer, it's a very crazy process. We hire someone who comes and takes a written test, they take a physical agility test, psychological exam, polygraph examination, detailed background check, interviews with me, an oral board exam, interviews with the police commission. After all of that, we then hire them and send them to the police academy for 27 weeks. I have no idea whatsoever how they're going to do, but we pay them their salary for 27 weeks. When they graduate the police academy, they have to do what's called field training. It's mandated by state statute, 400 hours. So an additional 10 weeks. So I pay someone 37 weeks of salary before they work their first day by themselves, before anyone knows whether or not they're gonna be a great employee or not. That'd be like Jan hiring a teacher and sending them to school to get their degree and paying them, and when they come back to find out they're horrible in the classroom. And so my phrase is, all employees are great employees until they're not. And when an employee turns out not to be so great, it's my job to make sure that we don't negatively retain an employee, because that's bad business for the town of Old Saybrook. So some of these folks that we've just hired, they're waiting their academy date. We might bring them on a little bit earlier because we have the funding, and send them for their medical certification and get that out of the way. I'm trying to make this very operationally efficient, but some of those folks we won't see for 6 months. And so while we're excited we filled the position, and we're excited to lower our ask by 80 grand, those people that the commission just hired, they're not in a police car driving around. They're 37 weeks away from that, from the time that they're able to start in the police academy. I just thought that that might be important for you guys to
That's
know.
not because of us, that's because the state mandates that we have,
All
when you
state
go to
mandates.
college, you pay for your own college to get your job, it's this kind of thing, they have to be hired by a police department in order to go.
So one of the questions on the pretest was, there are 365 days in the calendar year, not including leap year. How many days are police officers generally available for patrol work? Any guesses?
2
You mean an individual?
Individual, yeah. 365 days a year, I'm a police officer under that contract. Generally, how many days am I available for work? The answer is 190. 190, John, 0.45, because I want to be wrong. 190.45. So that's a lot. That's based on, if you don't mind if I just finish short. That's based on taking away all of the personal time, the sick time, and anticipated bereavement time, which is unbudgeted, that they're allowed to have as part of their contract. Yes.
Chief, I appreciate this presentation, but the board is behind you, and
They're always behind me,
I
George.
understand, bad choice of words. But I have and I appreciate your presentations. I have a series of questions, and I would like to know when I can begin.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
I have a series of questions.
He would like me to stop talking so he can ask questions. That's what George said. Go for it.
He's very polite at it.
But I'll let Bruce, the chair, basically.
Please start.
Thank you. So I appreciate the first one that came back in January, and I appreciate the book I gave today. I just want to double check on the numbers. You said that there's a reduction from the initial 80,000. I'm coming in at 12,000, but But I suspect the difference may be because for almost every single line item, the police commission approved a higher amount than what you had initially proposed, which then you readjusted to a lower amount. And so I suspect 80,000 is based on the addition of all the police commission totals. Because otherwise, I'm not exactly sure how you get to 80,000. My math isn't that fast. And so that'd be great.
All right, let me answer that question. Okay, so first of all, I remember you from Board of Education days, and I appreciate the rapid fire questioning technique of George Sheng. I gotta take them one by one.
All right.
Turn to page 41 for me in the new book. On page 41 of the new book, we've created a chart for you to follow that bouncing ball. So at the police commission meeting, let me finish my answer. At the police commission meeting, the police commission chose to add monies to the salary line item for a second in command position. When they made that motion, we put a number in and I said, but wait, there's going to be more because there's a FICA change and stuff like that, right? And so when we did that, Leanne was great. She was watching the meeting live. I woke up next morning, bam, the numbers were in my email, so thank you. So we made that adjustment based on their action. And then we made the additional adjustments based on the actions they took the other night. And that's why you see the 3 columns there. And so the difference between 282,826 and 202,741 is 8085.
Correct, and but yes, very much, but it's 12 for the first and third columns. And so the second point is, your department appreciably is very heavy on personnel
Yes.
costs, and I appreciate that. So right now it's about, my quick calculation is about 90%. And the majority of that is contractual, as you had indicated. And so when you say that there's not much leeway, there's almost, the only leeway you have is essentially the expenditure of essentially $500,000. And from what I can tell from the back of the book, it's essentially a 0% increase, asked me for $9,000 in workers' compensation, which I'll get to that in just a second. And so essentially it's a 0 increase. And so what I would like to see, and maybe I can somewhat bearing here, is the differences between the police salaries, the salary component, the benefits for last year compared to this year and so on. I can probably calculate some of that from your bottom of page 1, but it'd be nice to actually see those percentages. And then part of that is also what is the cost of the salaries if everybody just took a step and no salary increase? I guess we'll get to that when we actually do the police commission, police union contract again this year. I understand more about how that works, but not knowing that, what is the increase just based on step without the general wage increase, I guess is what it's called.
It should be minus 2.5%, right? Or 3% you calculated.
Well, but everybody gets a step, right? There's only 4 steps, right?
No.
It's a step.
So
I
turn to
appreciate,
page 3.
I appreciate that people on top stuff is going to split it up that.
Go ahead and turn to page 3. That's that.
I appreciate, yes, I understand. So half the people are on either step 2 or 4, and then there is probably a third on top step, no people that gotta step up. I appreciate that, but what is,
So the data that you're asking for is not represented in this book. So there is no chart that shows the difference between just a step increase and without the general wage increase, because it cannot happen. This is contractual.
but it can be calculated.
Sure, but it's an irrelevant number because it can't be.
Well, it's, I don't, well, okay.
So if a police officer is due their step raise
I understand,
and they're due their general wage increase, it's a combined number.
I understand. It's just, it's a,
You would like to know how much the
My-
step raises are by
thank you
themselves.
so much.
I'll get that for you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
The 90% part of this, where it's contractual, is my understanding about the second injury replacement numbers, again, excellent presentation. But from what you're describing, it is a fluid amount. It's your best guess right now, but it is more or less a fluid amount, I presume. These are the numbers you have on page, basically from pages 9, I guess 9 does it, 9 and 10, right? Basically,
So if you go to page 9, right?
right. But these are your best guesses on what it could be.
So if you look at the third paragraph on page 9,
Understood.
it says, it should be noted that fully funding at 50% of this earned benefit may not still be adequate. So we fund this at 50% of what they earn in the year. We don't take into account in our formula all of their banked.
Understood. So, but there could be some fluidity here in terms of at the end when actually.
Well, there could be at the end,
Sure.
but I would not reduce the 50% of what they earn in a year based on my potential liability. Again, comparing 132 to 932.
Nobody's suggesting that.
Well, I don't know that, but thank you for saying that.
I'm not suggesting,
Okay, good.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm just asking questions myself. Just some very naive questions, just a quick count. Your field, so the total personnel in the police department, 31 for field and 10 for support. That's pretty close.
Sounds about right.
Your marine budget at the end, is that part of this budget book, the budget request?
Sure, I'm fine with that. Bruce, are you okay with that?
Sure. No, just a quick question. Is the marine budget at the end?
Separate budgets.
There are two separate budgets that we
Yeah,
voted on
okay.
separately, but you
Understood.
can ask
Very
any
good.
question you
And
want.
then, so no, I'm good. I just want to make sure that the numbers, I'm not sure whether the numbers are separate together. And finally, you have $500,000 of basically operation component. Three categories add up to be almost half of it. Workers' comp, tech, communication, and fuel. That's up to about $250,000. Just double, that sounds about, that is correct.
Yeah, can I make a quick point on that? real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. But
Great,
if I
thank
can,
you.
if I can just to clarify why we bring that up, and tell me what this comp is?
Workers' compensation?
Yes, please.
It's, Lynn, you want to answer that or you want
Sure.
to? That's
So-
your thing?
I budget for workers' compensation. We, budget every single employee has a workers' compensation number based on our insurance company, Kerma, who gives us a percentage. So police officers have a higher percentage because they get injured more often than other folks. So that's formulaic as well.
So George, if you don't mind.
No, I guess, I'm sorry, I guess I didn't, the reason why I asked that, I understand basically what you said, it's just the way that paragraph was described in the book on page 35, this funding request for workers' compensation costs for all municipal employees assigned to the Department of Police Services.
Yeah.
I guess I misread that,
So in the schedule of personnel that I gave you,
Yes.
and all the board members at first, that schedule has each employee has their salary increase for every single
I
department.
see,
It also has, what they have chosen for a health insurance plan, or if they waive their life insurance and workers' comp. So workers' comp for, again, police officers is a much higher, and Department of Public Works. And for me, it's like $24 per year. You know, it's not a lot because I don't go anywhere.
It has a catering budget.
So for police officers, it's like, you know, $4,000 or something. It's based on their salary.
I see, all right, very good.
So quickly, George, on the expenses, because we didn't spend much time on that, so I appreciate you introducing that. So one of the things is, fuel. So Carl's a master at predicting the fuel market. In the last year or so, we have not entered into a contract. There have been some years where at this time, we've been in a fuel contract. And so at this point, it is not advisable, I would imagine, right, Carl?
Well, we haven't done it in about 2 years,
Yeah.
just
So we're paying the price of gas.
market price.
You'll notice, George, in the expenses and supplies, in addition to workers' compensation, I also requested and the commission approved an increase in the selection process and recruitment line item. And that's obviously for obvious reasons, just in case we have any other vacancies, we'll be advertising for a second in command position. But again, on your pretest, I listed what are the 3 things that you want to learn from the PERF study. And one of the things, I'm not sure if everyone here had the opportunity, has everyone read the 2023, August of 2023, responding to the staffing crisis, innovations in recruitment and retention report put out by PERF? Has anyone read this? Yeah, so in 2023, they came out with a very comprehensive document that studies the recruitment and retention crisis in law enforcement nationwide. I sadly think we're probably going to be paying for some of the very stuff that's in this free report because I don't think they're going to contradict themselves. But this is available on the website. You might want to take a look at it. And it does talk about some of the things that we're trying to do in the department contractually, et cetera, again from PERF. So just out of curiosity, real quick, does anyone want to share what they're hoping they learned from that study around the table?
Let me suggest that maybe board members have questions, and so why don't we ask some questions and then we can get to the board.
I think that's important. I'd be very interested to know that.
Are there other questions? Yes.
On page
12
New book, correct?
in the new book.
Yeah, thank you.
On the holidays, why is it that the second in command is gonna get 15 holidays?
Well, we're assuming that they're gonna get 15 holidays. Again, that'll be a contract that's negotiated. But 15 is the standard list of holidays. So the town of Old Saybrook annually puts out a list of all municipal holidays. And that number corresponds to the list that comes from the first selectman's office.
How come some sergeants get 6 days and other sergeants get 15?
Yeah, great question. So remember, it depends on when they were hired. So these are the days that they're paid out for, as opposed to the days that they get as floating vacation days.
So you're assuming that the second in command person is gonna be 15 days, but it could be 6?
Well, I think it's probably gonna be 15 because that's the list of the legal holidays at this point. Again, that might be someone, Brad, from outside the agency. So that would all be negotiated in a contract with the police commission.
But the second in command won't be union.
And on page 16, there's a difference in family health insurance. Is there a reason for that?
Where, but
Family health insurance now is that, it used to be that if you had a family, you had one kid, it was a family plan. If you had 4 kids, it was the same family plan. I don't know about how the towns work, but
I'm seeing,
enterprise, you pay for every kid.
I'm seeing 30,522 for one family plan and another family plan, 40,526.
You can have more kids.
That's for the chief and he has a different plan. So I budget those plans
These are-
and I give them the numbers. So that's me. that
So it's a
did that.
different plan?
That's a different plan. Mhm.
have we asked about anyone else's individual healthcare plan at these meetings?
Say again? What did you say?
I said, have you asked about any other individual employees' healthcare plans at these meetings?
No, the only thing I'm asking you is, there was a difference between 2 families. I just
Gotcha.
didn't know what.
Different plan.
What's that again?
Different plan.
Oh, okay, that's all that had to be said.
I just have a quick comment. I think in the future, once the new contract is settled, if it is a matter of public record, I think the Board of Finance should get a copy of that so that when you're going through this, they understand more of why you have the 3 people on the shift, why you have the sick time, why you have every day.
It's on the website.
I mean,
It's public.
that's at the back of the contract.
Yeah.
It's attached as an addendum, and that's filed in the town clerk's office. However, your point that maybe the individual members want the
We can do a
contract.
briefing.
Well,
We can
I mean,
brief
they
them.
can have the contract. I
Yeah.
mean,
It's online, right?
Yes.
With all the other
Yeah.
contracts.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's on the website.
Brad, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, but I'll wait for right now. I'll give somebody else a turn.
Jens, do you have a question? Are you, John? Megan, do you have a question? George, before you jump in, I got a couple. One is, I can't remember the total amount that we paid for the, new data collection system. 150,000, something like that. And it's generated a year's worth of data, at least. And I know that your formula, particularly your formula for determining patrolmen, is based on the data. And so I'm just, question I have is whether you can do it tonight or whether you can do it offline. I'd be interested in seeing how the data that you've been using to develop that, that number versus the data now that it's come in.
So we've always had the data to do the staffing formula. This new system hasn't provided me additional data to realize cost savings in our fiscal ask because it's operational in nature. So as an example, the contract dictates how many police officers are on each shift. 3. Let's say we had enough staff where I had 4 people on a day shift, 3 on the midnight shift, 3 on the evening shift. And the data that I'm collecting shows, wow, there's really an increase in call volume between 11 a.m. and 7 p.m. What I would do is schedule that officer, that extra officer, during that peak time. I don't have the staff to do that at this point. The data is telling me something that I do find very concerning. And it's telling me that over 80% of the time, our dedicated police officers are not getting their contractual break. Or if they're taking their break, they're not getting the full allotment that the contract allows. And that's due to call volume. So I log in time on task. So when a police officer's on break, they start, that clock starts running. When they go on a call or do another activity, the time starts running there. I equate it to what Carl used to use when he was an attorney to make sure he was properly billing clients. We're doing the same thing. We're time on task, very specific. And so that is a concerning piece of data that I have, because that tells me that we don't have work equity across the board, that our employees are working harder than what they should be doing based on their contract. And I do find that concerning.
So the answer is that the information that's being collected does not help you in determining the formula that you need in order to be able to figure out how many patrolmen you need.
That is incorrect.
I'm just trying to.
Yeah, sure.
Sort through what you-
Let me try it again. Perhaps the communication issues on my end. So with the old records management system that went archaic and can't get support for it anymore, and the new records management system, I am getting data to support the staffing formula. With the new system, I believe I'm getting cleaner data, but I cannot use that data to affect the operation at this point, to make it more efficient and effective, because I don't have the personnel resources to do it. But the data that I need to do the population to decide how many basic patrol officers we need, that data is readily available.
Okay,
And so on your pretest, one of the questions where it says, how many police officers are needed to staff one individual patrol shift, 365 days a year, the answer 2.0911, that comes from that very data from that system.
so I would be interested in seeing the formula based on the data that is coming off of that new system.
I would imagine after March 1st, I'll be invited back to the Board of Finance at some point. And if not, great. But if you need me back, I can bring that material.
The second command position here for salaries. How did you come up with 115,699?
Yeah, I think it's actually low based on other second in command positions. One of the things that we have to worry about, anybody has to worry about, is salary compression. And so as the police union goes through their negotiations and the dispatch union goes through their negotiations, we want to make sure that there's proper separation between different ranks and different positions and responsibilities. And so that's the salary that the police commission decided on. I think it's a little bit south of where we need to be, but that is the placeholder and the request that the police commission
I
approved.
thought I heard from, watching the meeting online, I thought it was 147,000. Was a number thrown out there.
I think
It's not
that,
on paper, I'm going by memory of your meeting online.
Right,
I thought it was 147, I thought you were talking about being so much less than your salary.
so my ask, Brad, was higher than this. This is the number that the police commission
So this
chose
got
then
toned down.
by the police commission. Yeah.
We're also not sure what that second command position is gonna be. It could be a lieutenant, it could be a captain, it could be a deputy chief. And like the chief just said, if we have a sergeant that's making 95,000, then that could change the other. I mean, you don't want to have somebody in charge that's only making $15,000 more.
So when you have compression, right? So say you're a patrolman, we have a sergeant vacancy. And you go from top step patrolman, where you get to choose your shift, part of the contract, shift preference, shift bidding. You're on the day shift. You choose, or you say, to become a sergeant, here's what I get to do. Maybe make $5,000 or $7,000 more to work the midnight shift for the next couple of years. And so that becomes a quality of life decision. And that's why we're seeing in this generation, people not seeking advancement, because they are preferring quality of life with their personal life as opposed to professional achievement. Back in my day, we would have taken any promotion and worked the worst shift in the world just to advance up the ladder. That is not the tone and tenor of current staff.
So the question I have is, what, you got it written down here, second in command, is it gonna be assistant chief, or is it gonna be?
Right, so I think Renee, you just said that. So that's gonna be a decision that I'm gonna collaborate with the police commission on. I have some thoughts. I think it should be a captain or a deputy chief. And that person would have to have commensurate certifications right? Depending on what they're coming in and what their responsibilities are going to be, we're gonna have to pay for that. So if we want someone who's attended the FBI National Academy to fill that spot, that's a credential that we pay for. If we want someone with a bachelor's or a master's degree, that's a credential that we're gonna have to pay for. So that's all gonna be part of a discussion, right, Renee, that we're gonna have together, and then we'll come up with that. Right now, the budget for that position is that number. That's one of the 25 full-time employees. That is not additional. So that second in command position is one of the 25 full-time law enforcement positions, like it has always been. We are not adding a position.
Can I ask this, is that second in command able to work additional shifts and make, some of the other monies that the other people?
So, in the past, they've been able to work private duty assignments, but generally not patrol assignments. So one of the things with the contract is there's this thing called bargaining unit work. So if a member of the bargaining unit does a certain job or task, that job or task becomes bargaining unit work. And therefore, no one outside of the bargaining unit can do that job or task. If they do, it's a potential violation of the bargaining unit agreement, and there can be claims made against the town. So I'll give you a great example. Let's say, years ago, our police officers directed traffic at all of our schools. And I found an efficient way to bring in a civilian to do some of that traffic direction duty. I went to the bargaining unit because it was bargaining unit work and asked them if they would release their 100% hold on that job related task to bring in someone who made less money to do that task. So that can't be done without negotiation.
Chief, I would just like you to clarify, you said there were three, but I assume you're on a 3-3-2 schedule. Wasn't yours?
4-2.
4-4-2?
Yeah, so 4 days on, 2 days off.
No, I meant the number of officers on a shift, the 3-3-2.
3-3-3.
I thought it was a 4-4-3 that we.
No, so my goal has always been 4-4-3.
Oh, okay.
We've never been able
I take
to
back the
achieve
question.
that. Yeah. John endorses the 4-4-3. So when we're back up to adequate staffing, we'll be able to do maybe that floating shift if we negotiate with that, with the union, peak times of calls for service. But right now, 3-3-3 is our shift minimum, and that's what we're staffing, 3-3-3.
Oh, it's 3-3-3.
3-3-3, yeah, by contract.
Thank you.
By contract, are you locked into the standard shift form, or have you determined through your computations that maybe it's a little bit busier from 8 in the evening till 4 in the morning? Could you stagger the shifts for extra?
So,
I'm not talking about the current officers,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you hired somebody to add.
Yep, so we have a very strong, and Carl can talk to this, we have a strong management rights provision in our contract. Probably one of the strongest management rights clauses among police departments in the state of Connecticut. So there are things that I am able to do with the schedule by exercising our management rights. One of them would be to meet the business needs of the town, adjusting some shift stature. But right now, shift scheduling, but right now, we don't have the personnel to do it. And so we're meeting our minimum of 3, 3, and 3.
Yeah, so what you're saying is you'd have to raise that from 25 to something else.
Right.
To add that swing person.
Right. And, one of the things that I think we forget is, we all watch television. Hopefully someone's watched, some sort of law enforcement show or seen it in the movie. You don't watch any television?
No.
Shut off, done from the world?
It's all garbage.
Fox News, you're watching Fox.
No,
No.
all garbage.
There are other positions in the police department that must be filled, like the detective position, right? So we used to have 2 detectives. We only have 1 now based on staffing. There's professional standards responsibilities. There's people that have to conduct internal affairs investigations in response to the Police Accountability Act in a certain manner. So there are other things that we must do in addition to responding to calls for service. And that's why I tell you, at some point, someday, maybe you won't be around the table. I know I won't be. Someone's gonna come in and say, where is the sergeant in charge of professional services? Where is the person in charge of dispatch? Who's overseeing records? The answer right now is everyone's a direct report to me, and that's unhealthy. professionally and personally. And it doesn't match up with any organizational chart whatsoever in any of the contemporary police departments. Which is why I hoped PERF was going to study, staffing and structure. Been a nonstop question in Old Saybrook. It's not in the scope, sadly, but I think that would be very interesting because I think those professionals would come in and highlight those non-patrol positions and be able to explain to people in your capacity why they're important for professional success of a law enforcement agency.
Now, I'd be interested in what your statistics show about criminal activity, officer response. I've always been, that's why I supported the second person in dispatch on the third shift. I've also been concerned about that time between 9 at night, 3, 4, 5 in the morning, or shifting it a little bit. That I was just wondering what your statistics would show that I just am very nervous about only having 2 patrol officers and a sergeant out there on that midnight shift.
And so 2 things to that. Number 1, all of our data now, there's a 24-hour delay on it for officer safety reasons, but you can go to our website and you can see every single call for service. We don't disclose personal addresses or names or stuff. You can see which officer is assigned, so you can tell work equity if you want right on there. You can also do little things. You can create a heat map of certain types of incidents that we respond to. Everything is 100% transparent that our agency does day in and day out, with the exception of maybe some very, very sensitive things. We are obviously not publishing domestic violence incidents or sexual assault incidents. The numbers are there, but they won't show up on the heat map. Secondly, to your point, when you look at that chart that George brought us to on page 3, where you look at the step location of each one of the police officers, and then there's a later chart in the book that shows us years of service, we have a very young department, which means our patrol supervisors are supervising and mentoring. But right now, the town of Old Saybrook uses them as direct service providers. That is also unhealthy. So a sergeant has a job. His or her job is to supervise and mentor. We're asking them to supervise, mentor, handle mid-management things, and directly respond to calls for service by themselves and have their own caseload. That is not good. And so I'd like to get the department to a place, and whoever my successor is, I hopefully will be able to accomplish that, to make sure that our sergeants are just that, sergeants. And so in the national staffing formulas, a formula supported by PERF in this very, very study from August 2023 aligns exactly with the staffing formula that we've been using for over a decade now when making our budget presentations, tells us that supervisory positions should not be included in the basic staffing formula. It should only be those who are delivering direct service, because supervisors have their separate job, supervising and mentoring. That job increases when you have a less tenured staff. A more tenured staff, sergeant doesn't have to overlook every single thing because the person's been on the job for a while. You become a well-rounded police officer at the 5 to 6 year mark in an agency our size.
I'm going to take the responsibility to chair. Our friends at the Board of Ed have been very patient, and we got started on this discussion late. My suggestion would be, if people have additional questions for the chief, why don't we send them to him? The chief has offered to come back after March 1 if we would like to meet with him at that point, and so we may.
Thank you. I have one task for John O'Brien before I go. John, 4 years ago, you put together this inflation chart. Remember this bad boy?
I'm too old to remember.
Would you, I'm gonna give it to you. Would you do it again? I haven't done it. I'd be interested in the data.
I'm just afraid you're too old for that.
He's gonna bring out his advocates and be fine.
Chief, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we need a quick break before the Board of Ed, or should we jump right into the Board of Ed?
Jump
Are
in.
you ready? Jan, you're up. Thank you very much.
Well, Jan and Pam take a minute to come up. My name is Karina Julius. I'm the chair of the board and fiscal of the budget and fiscal committee on the Board of Ed. And so I just wanted to let you guys know that we worked very closely with Julie before her retirement, Jan and Pam, to present, to create the budget and then present it to the board, and it was supported unanimously by the board at our last meeting. So, I just wanted to share that with you, and I can assure you, no quizzes or history lessons will be given.
Every lesson in my master's class starts with a free quiz. There you go. Welcome to the technique.
So, Jan, while you're getting ready, I would like to, number one, thank you very much for coming. Very much also appreciate your patience and you starting in such a delayed fashion. Before we start, I wanted to personally, and I'm sure on behalf of the board, express the fact that I'm sorry that this is your last presentation to us. You've been great. We've really appreciated having you as the superintendent here, and you will be missed.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I will miss Old Saybrook very much. Very much.
And with that, feel free to jump in.
Thank you. We did send over a PowerPoint presentation.
It should be ready. Let me ask for you.
Well, I have my budget, but I have my budget book up, but I do not see, is it in the folder maybe?
Is that it?
That's the book.
Yeah, is that the link that you sent to me?
No, I think they sent a presentation to you. I'll let you.
I did not realize you guys were link.
Okay.
I put the link up there.
Oh, okay, so you apologize. Okay. Oh, well, the budget presentation is also in the book. Unfortunately, though, it has some live links that gives you some valuable backup data.
I'm gonna hand up the snapshot that we were gonna go over before.
Okay, all right, great. We have a couple things that we're handing out now. First of all, you did get our book electronically a while ago, but now we're handing you a paper copy. Now, some people prefer a paper copy. And we also are handing out a couple of pages. This is not new information. It's just a snapshot of where we want to start talking about our budget. Also wanted you to have a copy of our fact sheet. This is something that Pamela Sturdy created. That is going to be, I think, helpful not only to you, but also to the community members. So we're asking, we've got some copies that we're getting. And then we ask that somebody left here at town hall to be handed out to the community members. We'll be doing the same on our side. Pamela Sturdy is with me. I know you're used to seeing Julie Pendleton with me. But Pamela Sturdy is, after many, many years of being our business assistant, is now the interim director of operations, facilities and finance. She is here tonight to help us present. So I want to start with this snapshot document, if I could. There are just 4 pages for you, and I know some of my friends here on the Board of Finance want to know what's the bottom line right at the beginning. So I'm presenting you with the bottom line right at the beginning. And if you flip past the first page, you'll see that every year we create a sustained services budget. And the question I ask is, if we open up the doors in September of 2024 and do things exactly the same as we did in September 2023, what does that budget look like? Obviously, some of those are projections, but often we're just rolling over contract information. And that was a 5.47 year-over-year increase. I'll let you read the numbers yourself. Simultaneously, the administrators are out working with teachers, working with the staff in their buildings, looking at the students in front of them that year, and they're creating their budget. The administrators' requests totaled 4.43% increase, or almost 1.3 million. And then we do our work at central office, and we look for places to make savings, look for appropriate reductions, still supporting programs, and look for places to combine resources with others. And we came up with a 3.38% budget, or $975,812, which the Board of Education then supported and adopted as their own budget. They moved a few things around internally, but everything remained the same bottom line. The next slide, so that kind of gives you that context of the work that we did. The next slide is the historic budgets that we have requested over the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. This is my 11th year, but I inherited my first budget. And you can see, we always say to the Board of Finance, we're asking for what we need. We're very careful to make sure that we ask just for what we need. Some of it, of course, is based on predictions and projections because we have the state who mandates things for us and ends up costing us quite a bit of money. Sometimes we have students move in who are more expensive to educate, but we have averaged just over 2% increase over the course of these years. And I think for an education budget during some very, very difficult years, I think we've done a marvelous job of really containing costs. And then the big bottom line is our pie chart that you see every year. That's the last slide I wanted to point out. And again, like the police department, most of our money is in people. It's in salaries, it's in benefits. It's about 79 to 80% of our budget. And then the other big dollar amounts are transportation and tuition, so special education tuitions, magnet school tuitions. Those flip-flop from year to year. We've had some years where transportation actually is more than special ed costs or rather tuition costs and vice versa. And you can see the rest of the pie slices are relatively small. So that's the big end of the story, really. Kind of the rest of it is you got the presentation. I got the presentation. Okay, can we get it up there? And let me figure out too. Can we share it? Can we share our screen?
Share it.
If you minimize this screen. All right, and then you should be able to go into. Yeah. Maybe itself. Share screen. There we go. There we go, we get it. And do slideshow. Excellent, thank you so much. So we'll start with the second slide. I have to, as the educational leader of the district, at least for a little while longer, I have to remind you of our 3 strategic plan goals. This is our promise to the community. This promise was created with some of you on board at the time, focus groups, lots of people involved and engaged. And we have said that we will funnel all of our decisions through these 3 goals: high quality instruction, equity, so access to education, equal access to education for all students, and providing a safe and supportive environment for our students and for our staff. There is the breakdown of the goals. We wanted to show you what we've been working on this year. One of the things that's important for us to talk about is our increased multilingual population in Old Saybrook. We have students coming in from outside of the country or within the country, but their primary language at home is not English. And so one of the things that we are working on doing is piloting an intake program. So we get to know these students and their families more quickly, get them involved. Because these students not only do we need to teach them content, we need to teach them English, and we need to have them catch up no matter where they came from or what their education was like prior to getting here. And having families engaged in that and having the students feeling like they belong to us is an incredibly important first step. I won't read all of these to you, but I want you to see the point of this slide and the following slides is to show you the work that we're doing this year on the strategic plan and the additional asks in next year's budget. Our second goal is high quality instruction, and I would say that there are 3 prongs of education that are really essential. Hire well, write good curriculum, have good instruction, and most other things sort of fall into place beyond that. So obviously this is incredibly important at the heart of what we do. We are using data cycles. So fancy word for we are creating hypotheses. We are going out to see if our hypotheses about instruction are valuable, if they're working, if they're making a difference. We're collecting data to determine that. We're tweaking our hypotheses and looking for and going out and starting the cycle all over again. This is something that we started really focusing on this year so we can gather data more quickly rather than having to wait for assessments to tell us the story. I'll go on to the next slide. And our final goal is safe and supportive environment. And you know, there's been a lot of emphasis on this since COVID, but we really have been putting a lot of emphasis on this in our district for a very long time. We know we have students who have all kinds of needs. We know we have staff who have all kinds of needs. And it's important for us that they have access to support and help that they need, whether that's lunch, whether it's food that they don't have, or money for other things, or it's mental health needs, or it's just executive functioning needs, needing to know how to manage school. And so we put a lot of resources into that. You know, if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you don't feel safe and you don't feel like you're part of something, it's very hard to move beyond that. These are all live links here. Yeah, let's focus on the middle school. So we wanted to highlight a few things. We all in the state, all the leaders were complaining about how many behavior issues we had, starting with the COVID year. We saw significant changes in student behavior, which most experts will say comes from you know, the stress that was associated with it, the isolation that was associated with it. What we did last year and continued this year is put behavior plans in place. The kids helped create these in the upper grades so that they were part of the solution. It has made a huge difference in the climate in our schools. They've really focused on leadership. Again, that's SEL, that's equity. One might argue it's high quality instruction, and found lots of ways to connect student learning at the middle school with the community itself. It's something we did pretty well at the high school, and now we're trying to do it at the middle school too. I mean, why not? Look at the location of the middle school, right? You can walk over to the town hall or any business on Main Street anytime you want. So that's just an example of what you'll see behind these slides. Would anyone like to see another one, or are we?
And as a note, this PowerPoint presentation is on our website. So if you want to be able to click through, obviously on the hard copy or even the digital PDF copy, you're not going to have that opportunity, but we did post the PowerPoint that if you were to look through it and you wanted to poke through a bunch of different things, we do have the live PowerPoint there.
I think we also all got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's in this, obviously the static copy is in the book. Anything you want to see before we move on? All right, two quick slides. We just like to show you, we run a comprehensive school district with a comprehensive high school, and even though we may be very small, we do our very best to meet the needs of students no matter where they're going after high school, college, university, trade schools, military, our transition program or another transition program, or straight to employment. And you can see we have students who go to Ivy Leagues, we have students who go to the military, we have students who go to our state universities, and including community colleges. There's another slide. Oh, you want back to that?
We need
And
more practice.
I guess so. And we're proud that we can send these kids there and that they do well and they feel like, I always ask the seniors during the senior activities, do you feel like you're ready? Like, did we prepare you? And a couple of them will say, well, that's not a fair question, is it? And they're right. But our statistics afterwards would tell us that, yes, we do.
Talk just a little bit about the 18 to 21 program.
Sure. Yeah, we are actually required by state law to continue to educate students with special education designations actually through the year of their 22nd birthday now, which the state did just this past year to come in line with federal law. And so we have a program that is now wrongly named the 18 to 21 program. But we are required to continue to educate these students to prepare them for the world. We have a program in-house that is actually a very robust program. It allows us to keep our students with us for a little bit longer, and it also keeps us from having to outplace them in what could be a very expensive outside special education placements. And some of those placements can run into the hundreds of thousands. So we have dedicated staff to that program. There's a vehicle that they can use, and we actually share this program with, Region 18, Lima Lima. So, we have some students who are, you might have only 2 students this year from Old Saybrook, maybe 4 from Lima Lima, or it could be the other way, the opposite year. And so it's really great to have an opportunity to share the expenses, the liability, the resources, and for the kids to have a larger group of people to work with. This one is our budget development process. It hasn't changed since I've been here. We continue to use this same process. We do the strategic plan review. Where did we get on action steps last year? We present that to the Board of Education every year in May and June. And then we pick up from there so that there is a cohesiveness. There's nothing more aggravating to educators than the initiative of the year, you know? So we make sure that we stay focused on those goals that we've set. I also think that that's a great way to save money because you're always focused on what you said you were going to do. We then look at the goals, the challenges, the mandates. We talk to the budget and fiscal committee of the board, and you just heard from Karina Julius, who is the chair of it. We go to the full board. And then we look constantly at enrollment and projections, program needs, like say our 18 to 21 program. Are there more students there? Are there fewer? Pre-K, are there more? Are there fewer? We look at cost savings. That work often happens at central office. And then we just also discuss the needs of the practitioners in the classroom because they're the boots on the ground. They're the ones who understand the needs as they're implemented in the classroom. And these are the other considerations that we have to think about this year. We always start with a zero-based budgeting process. We get really suspicious if somebody's budget looks like it just got bumped up 10%. Then we wonder, did we really go through and check to make sure these were our needs? And so I think people know that that's how we budget now. We do have reduced staffing in this budget because we're able to do that. We have some attrition. It will not be through layoffs. It'll be through retirement. And that will give us an opportunity to right-size staff without having an impact on our students. The legislative mandates is just an ongoing issue. In just the last few years, the costs associated with mandates has really become burdensome. And the biggest example and probably the biggest unfunded mandate in my career is our new reading requirement. So we are required to adopt the science of reading, which I fully support because the science of reading basically says the components of reading that need to be taught to all students that have been agreed upon over many years by reading specialists must be taught in the reading program. No argument there. Unfortunately, the State Department went way too many steps ahead of that and said, and you may choose from these 5 or 6 programs to do that. That's where I part company because A, those are expensive programs. B, I have no proof of efficacy that our scores read better, that our kids will read better. And C, it's a lot of money to ask Old Saybrook to come up with without having the confidence that it's going to make a difference. Unfortunately, that's where we find ourselves. And I can't even tell you how many hours I have spent fighting this. I mean, Carl Fortuna heard me talk about this almost 2 years ago now. And I said, it's coming and it's ugly and it's costing some districts millions of dollars. The other one that had a potential to have an impact on us was the change in the kindergarten start age. Again, going in line with more federal standards, although there isn't a federal standard, more states do the September. You must be 5 by September in order to be enrolled in kindergarten. We were always January. So we just rolled it back to September in the state, but then they made it immediately effective. So some communities are running around trying to figure out what they're going to do, where they're going to house these kids. Fortunately, the Board of Education in Old Saybrook over the last 5 years slowly lowered the tuition for ECP, for early childhood pre-K, that those 4-year-olds are already in our programs. We already have accounted for them. We've already absorbed them. They're either going to be in kindergarten or they're going to be in ECP next year. Either way, they're ours. So that's not going to have the budgetary impact. But the teacher evaluation plan will need to be redone. We will need to make some investments there. We're trying to keep the cost on that low, and that science of reading is the last one. And there are more. There are more. There are so many. I can't even I can't even name them, and the education committee, General Assembly starts meeting this week. Tomorrow, yeah, opening day, right. The governor has already said in his initial proposal, which probably will be changed, that, he's looking to cut, some of our ECS money, which is our big grant that comes back to the bottom line. Whether that happens or not, we'll see. There was some numbers that they worked with last year that were already lower than what we knew the actual, total dollar amount for special education was gonna cost. That's gonna hurt us. The governor's proposal actually dropped us by about $900,000, total for the whole proposal with everything. It was a third of the total money we typically get. And the education committee met, just briefly to sort of introduce each other, and they basically said, we already have a lot of bills to talk about, so I expect there'll be additional mandates next year. And I say that just heads up because there will be somebody new sitting here, and that person will be talking to you again about mandates.
So, briefly, ECS, you heard me talk about, how our money went from $1.2 million to 500,000, 550,000 over the course of, actually went very quickly. It was over the course of 3 or 4 years. We used to get about 550,000. That's the number I recall.
Mhm.
So ECS, educational cost sharing, is simply money. The town receives that money, and it is money to offset taxes. So we use that as a general fund revenue. That money went from 550 to, it's not a big number now. It's $105,000 or something.
The big drop was like 646 to 122, so it was a really big drop.
Yeah, that in ECS.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. So, and that's what we had to deal with during those mid-year cuts under Governor Malloy's administration.
Excess cost is the other one.
The tricky number is special ed, of
Right.
course.
That's the excess cost.
And I think most everybody in this room knows that. And I know that the state has been trying to, the towns are always like fully funded, or we need more funding for it. So obviously, any kind of a cut is going in the wrong direction. And the other elephant in the room has been for years, teachers' retirement,
Mhm.
which is still out there.
Mhm.
Teachers' retirement is fully funded, it is funded by the state. It is not fully funded. It's about, I think last I saw, about 56% funded or so. That's what I saw. But they threatened over the years under Governor Malloy, and even a little bit under Governor Lamont, there's been whispers about trying to put some of that teachers' retirement cost burden back onto the towns.
And the logic there is interesting.
That's
It's
enough. Right.
because communities like ours that
Right.
can afford to pay our teachers more are getting
Yeah.
more of the benefit from teachers' retirement. What they're misunderstanding about those negotiations is if you can afford to pay more in negotiations, you really have to pay more because we end up in binding arbitration, and we won't do well if we have the ability to pay. So it's sort of a double whammy and kind of confusing, but you're right, Carl, it's coming back and it's gonna keep
Well,
coming back.
there's always discussions about
Yeah,
it. So go ahead.
no, that's great, thank you.
Okay, so this slide gives you a brief idea of historical enrollment. We have highlighted 3 different groups of higher need students. So I'm showing you your special education population over the past 3 years. We have another group of students, who have additional needs, maybe not as intense as special education, that are classified under a 504 plan. And then an idea of economic challenges would be our free and reduced population. And you can see for the most part, those numbers have held fairly steady across the board over time. What you need to keep in mind is that there is a possibility with breaking them out to these 3 groups individually. It is possible that we have some students who will fit more than one bucket. So just keep that in mind. I don't want you to add them all up and then think that's a full part of our total enrollment. The bottom line is our full enrollments over the past 3 years, which we see has obviously been steadily declining. That's not unanticipated. As Jan had mentioned, we are looking at the opportunity through attrition to right-size staffing accordingly. So we keep that in mind as we move forward and we build the budget.
That? Okay, total enrollment. I thought we had 1,200 students.
So
No,
how far back do you have that enrollment data?
the total enrollment?
I mean, yeah.
The total enrollment, in the office, I have it back to about nineteen
All right.
Yeah.
That's-
thirties. If you want a spreadsheet for that. An additional category of students not outlined in the other slide, which Jan had mentioned earlier, is the rising increase in our overall percentage of our population of multilingual learners. And as she had mentioned, that we do what we need to do to bring these students up to speed as quickly as we can, to be able to participate fully in the classroom and get the most out of the educational experience. Obviously, like our other categories of students broken out on the other slide, in order to do that, it does take additional resources. So we just wanted to share with you, often there is a perspective that sometimes Old Saybrook isn't quite as diverse as we know it to be in our classrooms. So we like to share that with you, to know that although there's additional needs with these students, they also bring so much more to our classrooms and our learning experiences for both the teachers and the students. They're as valued as every other student in our classrooms.
Can I ask a question on that? Sure. Drop between last year and this year, about 5. Is that, people graduating or those families that moved out of town? Or-
The ML list or the
I'm
total?
multilinguals, what,
Um,
82 to 77?
So, that's a point in time. So we took that number on a particular day. And I would imagine if we did a census today, we would get a different number. This population tends to move into the community at lots of different times rather than at the start of the academic year. And what was your question? I'm sorry,
I
that,
just was wondering what the drop, was it
Yeah.
due to people graduating, or was there do we aware of families that have moved out of town?
I think it is probably people graduating and then just mobility, people just moving
But
going.
it's also same as on the slide
It is.
before with special ed 504 and free and
Right.
reduced. The numbers are down because enrollment's down.
Right,
Yeah,
percentage, yeah.
but
It all
there's,
stays the same.
there is also an opportunity for our multilingual learners. If we're doing our job really well and they're coming along to exit, they exit out of the program, which would also drop their number.
Also, this is a particular program.
This is a particular classification of students that if you tested a certain level, this is how you're classed. So as you come along, your skills improve,
Got it.
you're no longer fit in that
An
category.
assessment called Lost Links, and you can pass out of the program that way. Same is true for special ed. And the next 3 slides, we really don't need to do because we talked about them with you earlier.
This is a slide that breaks out our increase in a different perspective. We have instructional staffing, which can be our certified staff as well as our paraeducators in our classroom who are delivering instruction. We have our non-instructional staffing, our custodial, our secretarial, our food services, our athletic coaches, our activities. That is broken out as a piece of the increase. Obviously, medical benefits are a large part of any budget. We are expecting this year, based on our overall experience in our cooperative, although we've had a number of years of reduced rates. This year, our experience is reflecting a need to increase those rates, so we're expecting a 10% increase. So between changes in families and individuals and some changes in how they're enrolled, as well as the increase in the cost of the coverage, we're expecting that area to increase almost 200,000. Our capital plan has an increase of 148,000.
Which is relatively small compared to other years.
Right, we took a dip for a couple of years, particularly through COVID, where we weren't doing larger projects. This kind of brings it back where it was. And when we get to that piece of it, we'll highlight, if one the majority of this is one project in particular up at the high school, for an update, that's needed for safety reasons. And then the categories that are not out of the first four, everything else results in a $95,000 increase overall. So between other categories here and there that aren't in those four big topics, that's what we're looking at. The next slide, I believe Jan had included in the snapshot, was that correct?
No, I didn't include, but this is pretty straightforward. We just wanted you to see what that looks like next to each other. The salary increases. You heard the chief talking about staffing. Everybody's having staffing problems. It's more expensive to hire staff these days. And we are not immune. Our day-to-day subs, we've had to pay more to get them. And we are currently in negotiations or starting negotiations with our paraeducators, and our custodians. None of our certified staff are negotiating this current year. But there's no doubt about it, contracts are not settling as they used to at really low numbers.
And I just want to point out in this slide compared to the slide before it, we broke out instructional and non-instructional. And this one breaks it out to certified and non-certified. So we do have some that cross over between those two groups. So if you were looking between the two slides and trying to, why are they different? There's a difference between instructional, giving direct instruction to the classroom. Some of those are certified, some of those aren't. And so this breaks it out. So a lot of people are interested in just our certified staff. So we wanted to show that to you as well. You did talk about the budget allocation. If you're looking at the actual PowerPoint, you can click on the titles below and that will give you detailed information, just so you have that to look at in your own time. This slide shows, broken out in another way, our four big drivers that Jan had mentioned previously. Our salaries overall are increasing the 532,000. Our benefits, we already mentioned, are increasing. Now, the previous number was medical benefits that I said was almost 200,000. This is benefits overall. So this is medical, our life insurance, our workers' comp. So if you're trying to connect those numbers, that's where it is different. Our tuition and our transportation for next year are both going down. Although we have a new contract for in-district regular education transportation, I believe Jan mentioned that our need to send students out of district, which is reflected in tuitions and in transportation costs to transport them out of district, have reduced, which is why you see both those categories reduced. They're being driven by the special education changes, which this year it has changed in this direction. At any point in time, it can change in the other direction. So we're grateful for this year's situations. Okay, the teacher contracted increases. This is the same slide as last year. We're just giving you the comparison so you can see that during our 3-year contract that we have currently in place with our teachers, at the time where it compared with other negotiations in the state. So our first 2 years, we're at favorable comparison with the state, and we're being able to take realization of those numbers for fiscal year 25 with our certified staff having a contractual 3.85% increase. As you can see, we do expect that to change next year based on the timing of how the contracts came out, that our contract had the 3rd year had a bigger increase as opposed to the 1st year. And it's ironic that it's the opposite of how the state contracts had run that year. They got their increase in the 1st year, a higher amount, and the 3rd year of those contracts are a little bit less. Okay.
So, this tells a story about enrollment, really. It really is a remarkable story though, and you can see that it's not linear because we've had to institute new programs, whether it was to meet a requirement or because we had new students, like take your ML students, for example, you need to have teachers who are TESOL trained, teaching English as a second language, to work with students. And so we've had to add people, human resources to those programs to meet the needs of those students. But we have, whenever possible, tried to do this work through attrition. We've been pretty successful, though not 100% successful doing that. And you can see that we are really on a trajectory to decrease staffing. That's certified teachers, by the way. We also run a fairly flat administrative team. There are 9 of us, including the business person. And so, you know, a lot of us have a lot of direct reports.
So our next slide is a comparison of our area towns. The state puts out a statistic called the per pupil expenditure, which is based off of our average daily membership, which is a calculation where they take our full enrollment and adjust it by our average daily attendance. So again, if you were to look at that number compared to the enrollment slide, our enrollment slide is our hard numbers reporting for all students. This calculation uses an adjusted number to come up with a per pupil expenditure. And Old Saybrook is right in the middle of Westbrook, Essex, Deep River, Chester, Lima, Lyme, and Clinton. And for the most part, you can see the correlation of size of the district and the per pupil expenditure. You will see the anomaly is Essex, Deep River, and Chester, because their setup is, I believe, unique to the state, where they have 3 self-sufficient elementary schools, 2 shared middle and high school, which totally throws off economy of scale. So
They're all separate LEAs, they're all separate learning. They can't share resources without
agreements
It's
and
complicated.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's not me, let me put it down.
it shows it's not quite as efficient. So, this past year, based on our fiscal year 23, we were at an average per pupil expenditure of $25,708, which is not either high or low for the area. Okay.
Can I just do an overview on this? This is
Yes.
Pam's slide, but if you look at the last 5 years, it's a 0% increase. Because you go up by 20 and you go down by 20 over 5 years. And I realize it doesn't work out quite that way, but roughly it's a 0% increase if you're just using the percentages there. And I think, given what health insurance costs these days, I'm pretty proud of this, and I'm pretty proud of our little Train That Could consortium with Learn and a bunch of other school districts and towns. We just have really done quite well, and I'm very proud of that.
Okay. This is a really quick slide. At one point in time, it was thought that moving to the state plan would be advantageous for school districts. The state plan is a plan. It gives us very little flexibility with our bargaining units. It is what it is. There's not a whole lot of room to negotiate if a group wants a particular benefit. So we've been allowed that flexibility. At the same time, we have been able to manage costs in such a way that we get the flexibility. We get to be able to offer a little bit more to our staff at still a much lower cost to the comparable state plan. So that's what the slide's about.
And this was a bit hard fought in those first years when a number of unions were pushing to be on the state plan because it sounded so attractive. Everybody entered at the same allocation rate. I think we figured out that was probably not going to be a winner, and I'm not going to comment, but it wouldn't have been a winner for us, clearly.
And we've compared it in our unions, and it's not a winner for us.
So this next slide is our budget broken down into different buckets. If this slide is interactive, if there's one particular area you would like me to briefly explore, I can do that. You can also do that with the PowerPoint that's available. Is there one in particular you want me to take a look at? Or we can move on.
Actually, I'm gonna ask you a question, about it. So could you just go to the, water, electricity and natural gas?
Very hot topic.
Right, so there's about 432,000 in electricity. What, I know when November, whenever it was that, we visited you folks just before your, Board of Ed meeting. Question was raised about whether there were, ways to utilize, alternative energy, whether it's solar or something else, in order to, reduce that. And, Carl negotiated, or Carl got the LED lights along Main Street, and all of a sudden the electricity costs relative to that.
Thousand streetlights.
Right.
Yeah.
So I just, I asked you, I heard you say that, and we looked at it, it didn't seem like a good idea. I think much has changed relative to solar in the last even 2 years. And I'm just wondering whether or not it's worth taking a look at and seeing whether we can develop our own systems in such a way that we can begin to chip away at that number. Because I'm concerned electricity is not gonna get any cheaper, and it's going in the other direction pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, so yes, of course, we can take a look at it again, and probably every few years should take a look at it as things change so rapidly. I know that when we did look at it, Julie Pendleton and I sat with more than one group to talk about how it could work for us, and this was at least 5 years ago. And it was not a winner for us at the time. The other thing is that when we were talking about mounting solar panels to do like domestic hot water, we had to worry about safety with kids and access to the panels, so it had to be on roofs, and then we had to worry about the condition of our roofs. And so there is a lot of preliminary work that might need to be done, but it absolutely should be looked at every few years, because we know technology is changing.
We have, just so you're aware, you had mentioned the LED lights. We have at every opportunity where there have been programs, we have had our fixtures upgraded to more efficient. We've gone to the more efficient bulbs, and we've taken advantage of those electrical rebates to get those initiatives going. So any of those that have been applicable that we've been able to install and get going, we have done. So we do take advantage of the things, any of those types of things that we're able to get into the buildings.
Great, thank you.
Here we have the slide for the proposed capital operation budget. This has everything that Julie had put together in our plan for the upcoming year. So it was her grateful little retirement gift to us that it was all put together with the plan in place. Last year, we had painted the high school gym in some refurbishing there. And so the middle school, it's in rotation now that it's going to get the paint redone. We standardly do a floor refinish during the summer, so that is there as well. We are adding fencing for softball dugouts. We did that for baseball dugouts at the middle school last year. We're getting the softball field taken care of this year. We have a lot more art opportunities in our art room that include a lot of play. And so we're going to add a vent to that room just for indoor air quality, keeping that air circulating and clean for both the kids and the teachers. And we are looking at getting the gym dividing wall repaired. That dividing wall has been there for many, many years. It has served us well. Our preference would be able to get it repaired if possible. And potentially replaced. It is very expensive to do. The alternative is to have a curtain, which for both our outside use and our teachers who use the room and divide the room for reasons, it's not really ideal. So that's going to be one of the things that we're looking at, and we have money set aside for that. Gonna bop down to the central office. We're looking to replace our 2012 grounds and plow truck. because it's Connecticut and it's grounds and plowing and sand and salt and rust. So we try on a regular basis to rotate those out. And generally what we do is we have a maintenance truck. So the maintenance truck is generally newer. We're going to move that to the front line for plowing and being on the road. And then the new truck will go to the maintenance where it's a little more lightly used to begin with. And then that follows in rotation. So for the high school, I had mentioned that the majority of the increase was related to one project, and that is our track resurfacing. So over the past years, the expenses for everything has increased. The cost of the full track resurfacing is over $400,000. That is not bringing it down to the bare minimum. That is getting what needs to be repaired out and replacing the top layer of it. That is not with fancy colors, that's with the standard red color. And we probably have a little time, which is why we're looking to kind of bridge this project over more than one budget year. Because we're hoping that at the end of next year, we'll have this $125,000 and then we'll put the balance of what we need into the beginning of the following year so we can bridge the cost over 2 budget years. So it is much higher than what we expected. It will be needed. It's a safety issue. The track is used immensely. We have meets, we have practices, we have the public using it. For running, walking, etc. So we're doing our due diligence. We're putting it on the list. We're trying to get it to move forward. We don't know where this fiscal year is going to end. If we have opportunities to be a little more creative with bridging over years, we will look at that, but that's the big piece of the change for the capital plan. We're also looking at sealing the parking lot at the high school. It's time to do that to extend the life of the pavement. As I said, every year we refinish the gym floors. We have library shelving. The built-in library shelving is original. It needs to be replaced. It's been asked for the last number of years. And so we're looking to do that for $40,000. There's some art room furniture and the ABC lab is arts band and chorus. What's good to see? So that's in our fine arts wing, our lab there, and it's just updating the furniture and replacing it so it's more up to date and it works more small group style.
And I think, well, thank you. Worth mentioning at this point is that we may have a mandate to purchase new bleachers inside our gymnasium. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? And that might either bump some things here or may need to be done the following year. The Board of Education still has to think about this.
So we have to have a civil rights, Office of Civil Rights, OCR, comes in and reviews our programs, also reviews our facilities and determines whether we are compliant for ADA accessibility for everyone. We just had a review last year. We just got the report back. And the one finding they had was that our high school bleachers, because we've done such a good job of keeping them and not having to replace them, but they aren't compliant. They are requiring by March 1st, we give them a plan for how we're going to address that. Our hope is that we're going to tell them we're going to replace them. I have a cost on that. It's about $144,000 today. In today's dollars, should look fabulous, but we're going to hope, because we already built this budget, we're going to put the plan of completion at the end of fiscal year 26. But we don't know if they're going to accept that, pushing it out that far, or whether they're going to come back to us. And in which case, we might have to flip-flop, as you do with budgets, and reevaluate, reprioritize what we're going to have to do in the upcoming year.
And then probably worth mentioning that indoor air quality laws that have come forward, and I'm on a committee. I'm the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents Committee rep to this IAQ committee. But they are looking for us to uphold standards, and we're still working out the details, and I'm doing my best to explain the costs associated with it. They're looking for us to uphold some very significant air quality, indoor air quality standards that for us will require air conditioning in all three of our schools. So as you know, we've been working on that project at Goodwin. Before she left, Julie Pendleton resubmitted our grant request for Goodwin. We were denied the first time. We're looking to see if we can get it to pay off some of that Goodwin expense so that we can then start on the middle school before that law really begins to go into effect and we start coming up against deadlines. And we're concluding.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
On some of these expenses, they're recurring expenses like painting the gym floors and stuff. Do you keep a chart on that, or do you know exactly how long each item would last?
Our building custodial staff knows the schedule of when those things happen. And so we don't have a master. We do not have a master list of that. We work with each of the head custodians, but I had asked the question because I was like, Johnny, I thought we just did the floor at the high school. And this is an annual thing that in order to maintain the floors, we're on concrete slabs. In order to maintain the floors and keep them for years to come, they get refinished every year. So that's one of the things that is an every year thing. Painting is more, obviously, it's not every year. I think it has been quite some time since the middle school has been painted. But I think it also depends on usage, how durable it is. You know, some years paint's really good and will last forever, and some years it's not quite the same as you remember it to be. So we go, as the custodians work through their buildings each year, particularly in the summer, and they're going through if they see that tiles are popping on certain floors. So it's more an evaluation of the building and as it's needed, except for those things that we know we do every year. Every summer, they wax all the floors and they refinish all the hallways. So sometimes that's also why we have to limit our use to public groups who want to be using our buildings in August, because we're like, we need to get the hallways done.
I
So,
wasn't thinking of maintenance issues, I was thinking of major issues.
Yeah, it is, for these types of things, we really rely on our custodians and the folks who use those spaces, much like we do with our classroom teachers when we ask them, what are you gonna need to teach your kids next year? This is where we ask them to weigh in because they know how much use and how it's holding up.
and the building administrators as well,
Yeah,
because they know programmatically what they have coming up.
don't put in the ask for this.
The music department will, let us know, yeah, we're noticing the curtain, it's probably gonna be in the next couple of years.
Thank you.
We really are ready to conclude. No, it's everybody's happy moment.
Okay, in the document, there's also, 2 slides that, the Board of Finance had previously asked for some idea of our outside funding. So there's a slide for state and federal grants, which compares what we expect to receive this year or have received, as well as if we have, last year to this year. We can't necessarily predict what we're going to be getting next year, but it gives you an idea of the regular things that are recurring. And then, this slide has a couple of things that are episodic. It depends on what the initiative at the state is. Currently, it's FAFSA, and public families complete that. So they have small grants that support that initiative.
That's with that student loan, federal student loan. We are now required to walk students through that process and make sure that they complete it. And we are judged on how many of our students complete it. We did get some money to get that initiative going. I also want to just point out, very proud of the fact that we did not burden the town with additional positions and additional expenses when we were given our ARPS dollars. We made sure that we used those on one-time expenses. We only used it to pay for one full position for a 2-year period. And we told the person when we hired that person that it was just a 2-year position. So while other towns are talking about the fiscal cliff, We are not suffering from that because we've been able to watch, the only clip we're suffering from are the other grants that seem to be getting cut. But, we were very careful not to expend dollars on that and then build it into the operating budget.
Is this a list of all of your grants that you've applied for and already exist?
Some are entitlement, these are entitlement grants.
Yeah,
many
all
are.
kinds of grants. I mean, I remember numbers like $900,000 in total grants
Yeah, you did.
over the last several years. And this doesn't come close to that number.
No, that, because
I know
that
there's
number included a lot of COVID money. So that money has gone away, that ARP ESSER money that she was talking about, that we've avoided the cliff. A lot of that money went to air conditioning at Goodwin School. A very large chunk of it went there. Some of the money went to summer enrichment. So that money, you're right, you're not seeing here because we planned very carefully for that money, as Jan had said. We spent as much of it as was appropriate up front. So it wouldn't be something that was built in and depended upon, and then all of a sudden, we have to cut 11 people. We didn't want it to work that way, so that's why it looks much different. You're right.
All right, I like the pages.
I'm glad with you.
Okay.
Oops, I got very to the last slide.
Very
There you
to
go.
You see this slide every year, so I won't belabor the point. We just want you to know that we consider everything. We want you to know that we have significant constraints, like any organization does. Contractual obligations, changing needs, those legislative mandates, mandates from the State Department. And we work within and around them. Last thing I want to say to you is we have been talking with our colleagues across the area in communities that are similar to us economically. I believe we're coming in second lowest in increases.
We are.
Of the ones that reported so far. The numbers start up as high as over 8% increase. There is one below us.
Yes,
in the
there's
amount of
one below us. There's one at 8 that has $1.5 million in special projects. I believe there's 5 in 6 range. There's like about 4 in the 5% range, a few in the 4%. We're in 3, and there's one at 2.99%. So, we're at one of the lowest that are reporting as of this point.
And we are done, so thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
very much. Questions? Brad?
Let's say you did a great job,
Thank you.
really good job.
Thank you, Brad. We appreciate it.
And that's exciting. George?
I second Brad, and yeah, nice going. The first time on the hot seat.
Right?
And Jan, of course, you. I have a comment and a question that I should know actually the answer. The comment is, you know, when you show the bar graphs for the salaries and insurance, it's just a comment for this group that it's for payer employer, you're really better off having increases at the end of the year, at the end of time, because you pay less. You pay less. For the employee, actually, it suffers, but, so in that sense, for the state, for the comparison, having a higher increase at the end of the year is a better thing. Same thing for the health insurance, 10% over previous year, the previous year is essentially lower, you're much better off. The question I had was, and I should know this, but I don't, for the health insurance for the individual, 2 people in family and so on, is that the total cost, or is that the amount that the Board of Ed pays, not including what the teacher?
The Board of Ed.
That's the Board of
That's the
Ed.
Board of Ed cost.
I see. So the total cost is whatever the agreement is with the teacher would be 80% of.
Right. So if a family coverage were to be 25,000, potentially the employee is paying 3,900 and the balance the board's paying.
I see. So what you're showing is just the balance of those.
Just the board's expense,
I see.
just the board's expense. I mean,
No,
technically, their expenses coming out of their wages, which is also in there, but that's
No,
not what
I
I mean.
understand. I'll be transparent with where we're going with this, because we just saw a police report and they had a annual cost for their health insurance, and yours is less, but then it's not quite apples and apples because they don't
Yeah,
have.
right. Right, and like you said, contracts are different.
Of course,
We have
yeah,
different
no.
contracts, employees contribute different percentages. Yeah.
I understand.
Okay.
Other questions? I've got, one. one of the things that clearly I'm concerned about, and I'm sure you're concerned about, is as we watch the decline in enrollment.
Hmm.
And looking at what are ways in which we can encourage young families to move into town. I know 3 or 4 years ago, you guys, put a strong effort into trying to help make that happen. But one of the things that's come to my attention is the pre-K program. And that right now you have an enrollment cap. And a waiting list after that is the way I understand it. You can correct me when I'm wrong. And then what you said was the way in which we're going to handle the state mandate is there will be some 4-year-olds who basically are still going to be 4-year-olds on September 2nd. And so, but they'll stay in. But if we keep a cap, then, that means students that or children that are coming along to come into that program will begin to be shut out of that program. A long way to get to a question, which is, whether you've got a per pupil, cost on that or what. It would be interesting to know that if you were fully funded to be able to handle the waiting list, what that cost would be.
So, we can get that for you, but I want to speak to the waiting list, concept. This year, we did have some students, 4-year-olds. We never said we would have universal preschool for 3-year-olds, and I think there was some confusion according to what I read on social media about that. But we did say we would get as close to universal pre-K for 4-year-olds as we could, which was meant to attract people to the community. We added sections of ECP for that reason. Where we have a cap is the number of students in the classroom and the number of classrooms we actually
Well,
have.
that's what I was going to ask. Space.
It is a space issue. But we did add sections, did add teachers to accommodate the changes over the years. And we're not reluctant to do that again. Every year, as the academic year ends, the Board of Education gives the superintendent the right to add sections over the summer if they're needed. And so we could do that. And with this year's waiting list, my understanding from talking to Sarah Smalley, our Director of Student Services, is that everybody eventually, every 4-year-old came off the waiting list, or when we called them back, they had already gotten enrolled in something else. And so did not want to leave that program. So the waiting list is not a long waiting list anymore. And I would imagine, since we don't have as many students in our community, young people in our community as we did, that we won't necessarily have much of a waiting list in the future. Now, should we turn that around and we start to have lots of young families moving in, then we will need to come up with a more permanent solution, which might mean a different space. It might mean looking at the middle school or the high school and looking at, do we maybe put some young ones up at the high school and have older students working with them? And therefore you could do some really creative things there. But we are also looking, I've been part of a regional program, working with my colleagues from across the area, trying to come up with creative ways to get through all of the legislation about regional programs so that we can have some regional classes for students, like offering German and Mandarin and Arabic as a number of districts together, putting our teaching talents together so that our kids can have that. We have to hire a full-time teacher in that area, some advanced math classes. So we're hoping to be ready to go on that in the fall. We've been working on it for almost 2 years.
For the 3-year-old, have you considered the idea of basically running 2 half-day programs that would use the same space twice?
So for the 3-year-olds using half-day programs, there'd be some concerns about it. First of all, I think we'd still end up with pretty significant waiting lists. We'd have to figure out the expense associated with educating 3-year-olds. And then we have a transportation issue. And right now, we don't have buses even for our regular runs. That would be a problem.
Thank you very much.
We are looking at, I believe Jan's been working on a project with the Y program for before and after care.
Yeah.
We run into a problem with that age group that you have to have a certain licensure to be able to have before and after care, so we're partnering with the Y. So that makes it also more attractive to families, because some families don't have they want the kids in the program, but then there's that gap.
They're looking for summer, they're looking for school vacations, they're looking before and after. Before and after, we think we've got that one figured out. The other ones are a little bit more complex. And we're talking even potentially about sharing staff with the Y. Some of our para educators could kind of go between the two.
Bert?
I can you follow up on Bruce's question, and maybe, this maybe adds on to Bruce's question, but then maybe you can help me understand this, right? So on page 4, there's a table basically of the students, no Saybrook, right now, and so basically the number of students in fiscal 24 and fiscal 25, and so the early childhood program for fiscal year 24 is 85, and so we project that down to 25, you see that going to kindergarten is 56, and so you think about the 84, I mean, very, very naively, right? You think about the entire 85 people in early childhood 84.
It's 2 ages.
2 ages, correct, right? And so going to 85, 56 of the, let's just say 100% of the pre-K 4 were in that program, 56 peeled off, and so essentially out of that 85, about 30 of them were pre-K 3. I'm trying to anticipate how many people there are pre-K 3, it's going to be around 50, 60, so almost 0.5% of the people in the pre-K 3 are already in that program. Projected for number 825, the number goes up to 94, so already looking at almost a 10 spot increase for a population of about maybe 50, 60 people. That's a pretty substantial increase, and so I think if those are the numbers are correct, I think we're addressing some of those issues already, perhaps quantitatively in here. It'd be interesting to see how that all does.
Got it. Other questions people have? Been on there.
What he said.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time and attention. We greatly appreciate it. If you have any follow-up questions, let us know.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so, on the, the joint agenda, I think it's, that's about it. We talked about, any other general government budget. I guess my comment at this point would be, nobody gets, there, you can always fund more, everybody wants more, we saw the Board of Ed compare themselves to other towns around us in terms of numbers. When the chief was talking a little bit about how he would like to see some of his folks not be burdened with either supervising or mentoring. There's always an ask, and not everybody can get what they want. I mean, there's a lot of things we could fund in theory, but it might be difficult to fund. In addition to that, with regard to comparing ourselves to other towns, like the Board of Ed did, I would do that with the police department. I've done that, when a lot of people have said we have too many cops, I've said we actually have a very similar amount of cops to other towns like us. You have to compare municipal police departments. So East Lyme, Waterford, Saybrook, Clinton, Madison, Guilford. When you look at those towns population wise, and then add in the commercial, you look at Old Saybrook and you'd say, we're probably right size. We're probably about where we need to be from the police force. And could you have officers who are just doing this and then have someone else? Sure you could. And when you get to staffing, I've learned stuff as we were going through the solicitations with these folks, consulting folks. When you talk about staffing, it's not as simple as population, how many calls you might get for crimes, but it's what the community wants. So do we want cops opening locked doors? We could say no, and the need might be less. Do we want officers to come to every little fender bender? They don't always do that in every community. If we say no, maybe it's 23 cops. If we say we want officers to do more, we might need 27 cops. So staffing is not a straight formulaic pitch. And I think we are going to hear some of that when we get the consultant in.
Okay.
Not a full study, but you're going to get an overview if you want a full study. And you're talking about staffing as to what that might look like. in terms of what the community wants. Anyway, I'll
What's
stop.
the contract status on that?
Actually, while we were sitting here tonight,
You already-
I got my review in, from Firma. So I didn't even look at it. It came during the meeting tonight. I'll probably turn that around tomorrow and get it back to them.
Okay, okay.
We've already done a document dump on them. Leanne prepared some documents we already had. In fact, I have a document for you to give you back. So, you know, in anticipation of the contract being signed, I inquired of them. I assume you're gonna want some documents before you come up here. So we've tried to unload as much as we can in advance.
Do they, excuse me, incident study, do they study incident study?
They'll study, I mean, they'll study anything you want to study.
That would be a good place to look.
So everyone can have this conversation and maybe educate themselves when they come in.
Okay.
So anyway,
So is your meeting done, sir?
our meeting.
That's good. That's our joint meeting is our.
So why don't we adjourn the joint meeting?
I'll make that motion.
And second, and we'll also stand adjourned, when you guys vote.
And so all in favor of adjourning the joint meeting, say aye. Okay. Now, the chair is now calling back the recessed, regular meeting of the Board of Finance, and I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Good job.